Ian felt a sense of finality rise within him, but it was joined with something else. Sadness? Excitement? Could it even be fear? Ian wasn't sure which was a new feeling to him, too. With his handsomeness, wealth, and social dominance, Ian had never felt unsure about anything. Ever. His mother had guaranteed that. Over the years, he'd felt the pressure of his duty, his parents' strong handed guidance, the weight of his family legacy, but never insecurity. Hey! Ian suddenly heard someone yell from the procession line. He looked over just in time to see Dan Cahill get flipped upside down by the Holt sisters, Madison and Reagan. The child bodybuilders had grabbed hold of one leg each, and Dan was swinging like a blonde haired bat in street bought funeral clothes. Look, guys, 11-year-old Madison said. We caught a rat. Dan was wriggling and throwing punches into the air, trying to get free, but his tie kept flapping in his face. And this is my competition? Ian laughed. The rest of the Holt family, Hamilton, and their parents, Eisenhower and Mary Todd, jogged up in formation, wearing matching purple tracksuits. Ian wondered how they could possibly manage to don uniforms every day, looking like the waitstaff of that horrid excuse for a restaurant, McDonald's. More important, he wondered where Amy was. That mangy bookworm was always with her little brother. It was rather sweet, like the runt of the litter protecting the deranged one. Then he saw her. Amy's face had gone pale, and she appeared to be stammering, as usual. The Holts were laughing at her. Ian's mum, Isabel Cabra, said weakness should always be laughed at. Well, the Holt family was doing a fine job. The girls finally dropped Dan, and Ian turned his attention back to the minister. Natalie must have been employing her interrogation training, since he looked a little frightened of her. Indeed, he looked scared of everyone. He kept wiping his sweaty forehead with a handkerchief and looking anxiously back and forth. Ian knew he should probably call her off. It was unlikely the poor fellow knew anything useful. Ian looked back to Amy and Dan. Ian's mother said they posed the greatest threat, though Ian still couldn't believe it. The two siblings could barely dress themselves. How could they ever become the most influential people in the world? The funeral procession ended, and Reverend Niblock, probably in an attempt to get away from Natalie, asked everyone to be seated. Ian dragged his sister over to the row behind Amy and Dan, trying to remain close to them. Well, any success? Ian asked his sister. No, Natalie replied in a huff. He has a border collie named Mosses, but that's all I got. Ian snickered. Shut up, Natalie said. Loads of help you were. All you could do was stare at that fashion tragedy show, Amy and Dan. Now we have to sit behind them? She shuddered. I hope we don't catch something. As they took their seats, Ian noticed an African American woman in the row behind them, dressed in a black sweater dress, which was pilly and bookish looking. A floral silk scarf around her neck added some color, but her glasses didn't even have designer frames. It's frightening, the kind of riffraff that sneak into these things, Ian thought. But then Amy flicked her reddish-brown hair over her shoulder from the seat in front of him as she blew her nose, and Ian snapped back to reality. It was time to focus. Everything he'd been training for, all the plans the Lucians had spent centuries scheming, it all led up to this. He took a deep breath, inhaling the surprisingly fragrant colonial air. It was a beautiful day for world domination. Mummy will be so proud. Jonah Wizard sat down in the front row and waved to his fans across the grave plot. A group of girls over there was going gaga for him. They all had on Wizard tees from his last concert in Toronto, the bedazzled special edition ones, and had drawn his tag sign on their cheeks in black eyeliner, funeral appropriate. Jonah smiled his best gangsta smile at the girls. I have the most dedicated fan base ever. Dad, Jonah turned to his father in the seat beside him. Make sure those girls get 3rd anniversary Jonah Wizard mugs, okay? Mugs. Broderick Wizard tapped into his BlackBerry. Got it. Jonah looked back to the crowd, searching for Amy and Dan Cahill. Everyone knew they were Grace's favorites. She had probably given them inside information. Jonah had to find a way to take care of those little nobodies before they could take advantage of their head start. But where were they? Son, Jonah's dad interrupted his thoughts. Did you call the producer of the Really Late Show back? They want to have you on for Gangsta Life. Book it for me, Jonah answered, distractedly, scanning the crowd. There must have been over 400 people at the funeral. Jonah knew crowds. He was the world's biggest hip-hop star and under age 17. He'd been filling sports stadiums, amphitheaters, and mega music halls since he was 12 years old. This many people in one place invigorated him. But why more people at the funeral weren't noticing him confused Jonah a bit. Didn't they know his new album, Gangsta Life, had just premiered at number 3 on the French music chart? Then he spotted Amy and Dan. Amy was in a black dress with a little collar that kept flapping up against her cheek in the breeze. But she didn't seem to care. She just kept staring ahead with a blank look on her face. And Dan was slumped over in his chair, kind of leaning against Amy. Even though they needed a major upgrade in the swagger department, Jonah knew he had to keep an eye on them. He might be the most talented performer of his age, but if his mom was right, he was about to get the chance to become something much bigger. He wasn't gonna risk it over a couple of kids who couldn't even rhyme a couplet if the beat hit him on the head. During the service, Rev Niblock kept glancing over at the cabras, then back down at his watch. Sweat dripped from his forehead. Man, someone should teach him about stage presence, Jonah thought. Grace would have been asleep by now if she weren't already dead. Jonah had to admit that he didn't know Grace that well, but he had remembered her as a pretty nice lady. She once showed him her vast music archive, full of first pressing records and ancient sheet music. Original manuscripts from Bach to Tupac lined the shelves of her music library. Grace had taste. There was no arguing with that.